Hello, this is Wes Bridle, and this is another Kingdom Calling Economic Update video. All of these videos are subsequent to the Coming Storm video that we put out in November, which gives you a big picture of what's going to be happening in our economy. I invite you to go watch that for free. It will show you what's going to happen, and you'll notice as you watch it that many of the predictions that we made have already come true, yet the biggest, scariest predictions haven't come true. There's going to be things coming down. They're just economic realities. If you open your eyes to what's happening in our economy, what's happening with the dollar, what's happening around the world, you can't ignore these things that are happening. They're easy to ignore because we get caught up in our daily life, but these things are absolutely happening. The financial reform bill that Congress just passed, that the president's about to sign, has a bunch more mess in it that just takes us further down this road. So we're going to look at some of the details of this in this video. I haven't read the bill. It's thousands of pages, I believe, and I don't have time to read that, but I have just kind of collected stories of what other people who have looked at it have said about it, and so I'm going to share some of those with you. The banking analyst Dick Bove said that this financial reform is going to be good for banks. It's going to be terrible for consumers. So if the government's real point was to protect consumers, they did a horrible job with this bill. But that's, of course, not their real point. Their real point is to help their friends on Wall Street and to help Wall Street help them design bills that will set up more red tape so it's harder for new competitors to join it. And it's perfectly set up for more bailouts in the future if these institutions need that. Meanwhile, it's going to be more expensive for you and I to live our lives because of this bill. Dick Bove said that it didn't deal with real problems and it's fixing non-existent problems. So problems that didn't exist, it's fixing, and it's not dealing with real problems that actually exist in the current financial system. He said it makes no sense that capital and risk standards for nation's largest banks are more lenient than for small banks. The small banks aren't causing big problems that really hurt the entire U.S. economy. It's the really big banks that do that. And yet the standards for the really big banks are more lenient than the standards for the small banks. The really big banks are the ones that take all the crazy risk and do all the stupid things. Your small local bank most likely is not doing those stupid things. And yet they're making life harder on the small banks because the small banks aren't as good at lobbying and doing all the things that these huge Wall Street mega banks do. There's going to be more fees for consumers and more red tape. I've already said that. There are 8 new federal bureaucracies developed in this bill. So if you think Washington is good at doing stuff, we got 8 full new systems, bureaucracies set up in Washington to regulate these things. One of the scary things, with a 2/3 vote, the Oversight Council can take over any bank. It seems quite clear to me what's going to happen. There's going to be more financial turmoil. There's going to be another credit crisis. And now the government, because of this bill, is going to have absolutely the right and the authority to step in and take over all these banks. Well, I'm just totally guessing here, but my guess is they're going to take over doing that at some point, and they're going to use the banks to just pass out free money, and that might be exactly a thing that really caused hyperinflation to shoot off. But that's a scary thing. We used to be a capitalist country. We didn't used to be a communist, socialist country, but that's really changed. And the bill did not deal with the government-backed agencies or Congress itself. The biggest problems that we've had over the last decade in our financial system is Congress pushing companies to do certain things, and then these quasi-governmental agencies such as Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, these are pushed by the government to do certain things. These ended up being fully backed by the taxpayer. You ended up bailing these agencies out. And so these were right at the heart of the financial problems that we had. And yet, did the financial reform mess with these? No. The agencies that were the biggest problem for us in the financial crisis were not touched at all. They were totally exempted. They went after controlling the private companies that were not nearly as big a problem in the financial crisis. They certainly have problems, but they weren't at the heart of the crisis like these governmental agencies, and the governmental agencies were exempted. So it tells you what the government's really doing with their financial reform. Chris Dodd made a comment that no one will know until this is in place how it actually works. I don't think that's the right way to pass laws, that you don't know how it works until after it's in place. I think it might be wise to know what you're doing before you set up a new laws in place. And yet the guy whose name is on the bill, one of the main pushers of this bill, says no one really knows how it works. We're just going to put it in place and then we'll find out how it works. That's brilliant. Federal Reserve has a near total autonomy to write and enforce rules in this thing. So the Federal Reserve, which a lot of people are upset about, most of the congressmen signed a bill last year to audit the Federal Reserve because they're a totally secret organization that has massive power. They've admitted in some ways to manipulating sectors of our economy. They have destroyed the value of the dollar over the last century, and yet no one can see what they're doing or comment on it. Well, we've given them a whole lot more power in this new bill. Banks must spin off commodity trading except gold and silver. Well, if you don't remember, in March 25th, the CFTC, the Commodities Futures Trading Commission, had a big hearing about manipulation in commodities market. Which market was it? Gold and silver. Well, if gold and silver are the ones being manipulated, and far more people wrote in about gold and silver, particularly silver, manipulation than any other commodity, if that's the one that's being manipulated, and there's tremendous proof came out at that hearing that that is being done, well then shouldn't that be the one that this regulation deals with? No, we've decided we're going to exempt that one, and the regulation is going to apply to all the other ones, that there's no insinuation of any problem at all. It gives you an idea of what's really going on here. There's a new 1099 requirement, and I've read different things about this, so I'm not sure what to make of it quite yet, but what it says is that buying or selling anything more than $600 will require a 1099. This is incredible bureaucracy. This is the type of thing in many, many countries around the world. There are so many taxes and rules that it's really unbearable and it's impossible to live life in that way, so people ignore them. In this country, I think most of our country really obeys the rules and the laws and the taxes and tries to do things the way they're supposed to do them. And for the most part, especially the further back you go, it's been bearable to do so. And the whole system has worked because we have had fairly few and reasonable regulations and taxes, and people have done that. Well, now they're talking about an absolutely unreasonable thing here. Any transaction over $600 requiring a 1099, that will make life much, much more difficult. It's exactly the sort of thing that causes people to start ignoring the government and going around the government. That is horrible for society. It's horrible for our citizenry, for our government. What it might be, I saw somebody that believes it is a precursor to the value-added tax. We've talked about the probability of this being introduced at some point here in America. This is already a big problem in Europe that sucks the life out of their economy, but it's a great way for the government to get more money out of the hands of the people in order to use it without them really noticing that that's what they're doing, and perhaps that's what the government's doing here. There are 2 or 3 bills in place where congressmen are trying to get this, either the whole financial reform bill out or this particular rule, so maybe that will happen. There's a Volcker rule in the bill, and apparently Volcker doesn't like the rule because it's so watered down from what he stands for. And lastly, the financial reform bill gives the federal government power to subpoena any financial record from any financial institution without probable cause. My friend Cheryl sent this to me, and that's a scary thing. Any record that you have, the government can just decide it's theirs to look at without showing any probable cause. That breaks the that breaks the Constitution. We're long away from what the Constitution says, but this financial reform bill definitely throws all that out the window. I hope you've enjoyed this. Again, if you haven't seen the Coming Storm video, I highly recommend you go and do that for free. Thank you, and God bless you.